This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation. The Nigel Farage Show.
Everybody, I hope it's not snowing too hard where you are. And there seems to be, in Downing Street and amongst the government, they've had a very good couple of days. They're really, really pleased with themselves. She came back on Friday with a deal. And I was amazed that even the quite Eurosceptic members of the cabinet, and indeed on the backbenches, from them there was very little criticism. Indeed, Andrew Rawnsley writes in today's Observer, he says, everyone is happy. Well, everyone except Nigel Farage, with his shouts of betrayal. So this morning, I'm going to be asking you, am I the only one who seems to think that Theresa May has got a rotten deal? And we want your thoughts and your input. And of course, you can do that by calling 0345 6060 973. You can text to 84850. You can tweet using the hashtag Farage and LBC at LBC. And of course, you can watch the show and the interviews live on Facebook and comment there too. Now, it's interesting when the Prime Minister, who was elected on a Brexit means Brexit ticket, gets, I would say, a degree of praise from my next guest, which kind of made me worried had she gone too much towards the pro-EU side. But I'm very pleased to say that joining me this morning is Sir Vince Cable, leader of the Liberal Democrats. Good morning, Vince.
Good morning, Nigel.
And it would be right to say that you were quite complimentary about the Prime Minister on Friday.
Well, what I basically said is she's done the best of a bad job. I don't think it's a great deal, like you. I mean, I think it's what we're going to get out of this is a pretty poor deal. We're paying in vast sums of money, was it 40, 50, maybe 100 billion, who knows? And there's no guarantee we get any kind of acceptable trade deal at the end of it, and it may actually be a rather poor trade deal. So I think that the one big thing that's happened is that the chances of a dramatic break, a crashing out, whatever we want to call it, I think that the chances of that have receded, and the chances have increased of a deal of some kind, which will probably not be a good one from the British public's point of view.
One of the commitments in this document that I was quite surprised by was the concept of regulatory alignment. I mean, hasn't the government effectively said that whilst we're going to leave the European Union, leave the treaty at the end of March 2019, aren't they almost saying we're going to stay part of the single market or very close to it?
That's the way I've interpreted it, yes. It's a very strange passage, and it was put in to try and placate the Irish and the Democratic Unionists at the same time, which is a bit of a contradiction. But what they now seem to be saying is that we will stay within the single market, which is what regulatory convergence means, and the customs union until such a time as we can sort out the problems with the Irish frontier. Well, as you know, this problem has been going on for hundreds of years. I mean, I think this is actually a formula for putting off leaving pretty much forever.
Which means, as far as I'm concerned, that whilst the Conservative Party the sceptics may be very quiet at the moment, I don't think it's going to be very long before she starts to get some quite big divisions within her own cabinet on this.
I'm not sure how quiet they're being. I mean, I did a piece this morning for the Mail on Sunday about Mr. Gove. I think within hours of having poured praise on the Prime Minister, he was quickly regretting it and putting the knife in. No, I think the hardline Eurosceptics, however we want to call them, realise that she has got the better of them in the short run, and with a kind of arrangement that will keep us close to the European Union, and they're preparing for the next round of the battle.
Now, before I get to the Liberal Democrats' position on this, a word from you perhaps about the Labour Party. Where do you see the Labour Party? I mean, help the listeners, because it's quite confusing.
Confusing is very kind and charitable from you.
Well, it's a Sunday morning.
Yes, it is a Sunday morning. They've got away with murder, actually. I mean, there were hundreds of thousands, maybe millions of young people who voted for Jeremy Corbyn in June, thinking that this is a great champion of Europe. And of course, he's nothing of the kind. The leadership of the Labour Party, not the bulk of MPs, but the leadership, has always been very hostile to the European project. I mean, it's an old-fashioned kind of 1970s, rather Leninist view, you know, that the European Union is a wicked capitalist club and we don't want anything to do with it. And they've got away with that, being totally ambiguous as to whether they want Britain to stay in the single market and the customs union. And because all the focus has been on the splits within the government, they've got away with it.
But Keir Starmer is clearly the strongest voice within the Labour Party, and he basically is saying that he wants Labour to sign up to the single market and the customs union for a long period of time, isn't he?
I think that's his personal view, and it's certainly the view of a lot of Labour backbenchers. But the group at the top of the party, Jeremy, John MacDonald and the rest, are in a very, very different place.
And this will all come to a vote, of course, in the Commons this week.
Yes, because my party's put forward something which, is designed to keep us within the single market, but politically will hopefully have the effect of flushing out the Labour Party, because if they vote against it, they will be saying, look, no, we don't want to be part of the single market. Well, then we'll know them where they stand.
Well, we've talked about a slight lack of clarity in Labour and some confusion amongst the Conservatives, so let's just be absolutely clear where the Liberal Democrats stand on this question of the referendum of last year. Are you trying to reverse Brexit?
We think that we should stay within the European Union. We do accept that the referendum happened, the public voted, we're pressing ahead with negotiations. What we do want is a public vote at the end of the negotiations, and if it's a bad deal or no deal, to give the British public the choice, do you want to push ahead with that, or do you want an exit from Brexit? So we do support the principle of having a public vote, not rerunning the last one, but a vote on the facts of Brexit once we know what we are. And I'd have thought, given your faith in the public voice, you might actually come along with us on that, maybe for different reasons, but we might actually count you as an ally.
That's all I can see is that since the referendum, a lot of people who voted Remain now say either we've changed our minds, or they say that a democratic result should be respected, we should get on with it. So in a sense, would I mind a second referendum? I think there'd be an even more thumping endorsement of leaving, but I'm not actually sure there's much appetite at this moment in time for there to be a second referendum. That, of course, could change. But I'm very interested, when you talk about an exit from Brexit, that would mean effectively reapplying to join the European Union, wouldn't it?
No, it would involve reapplying to join the European Union if we waited till the whole Article 50 had expired. But if this were carried out before March 2019, which is the way we think it should be, and we will know the results of the negotiation well before then the choice the public would have: do you want to get out of the European Union on the terms the government negotiated, or do you want to stay in?
If we were, and I don't believe it's going to happen, and maybe you want it to, but if we were to stay in, to revoke Article 50 and to stay in, it's quite important to understand that Mr. Juncker made it really clear in his State of Union speech this year that in future, anyone that stays a member of the European Union will not be able to opt out of the single currency, and will have to give up a veto on foreign policy and be part of a European army. I mean, are they all things you want as Liberal Democrat leader?
No, absolutely not. That is, as you quite rightly say, Mr. Juncker's vision. But you may remember that the following day, the Prime Minister of the Netherlands, who was a much more sensible and pragmatic chap, said that Mr. Juncker has visions and he should go and see an optician. I think that is I would regard that as more the mainstream European view.
Well, it's a great line, but let me tell you what the mainstream European view is. I know, because I was there. I was there in the chamber. I listened to Mr. Juncker. He's always highly entertaining, if nothing else. And what was interesting about this speech, about moving on effectively, he didn't use the phrase United States of Europe, although Mr. Schulz in Germany this week has. But everything he was describing was a United States of Europe. And when he'd finished, I saw Liberals and Social Democrats and Conservatives giving him one of the biggest cheering, standing ovations. And one of the things I never understand, and I had this conversation more than once with Nick Clegg, was that it seems that you support the European project, but you never quite want to tell the British people just how deep this political integration is genuinely going to go.
Well, I wouldn't have given him a standing ovation because I don't agree with that vision, and my party doesn't either. I mean, I think what is happening in Europe is you are getting an inner core based on the Eurozone where many of the members share exactly the vision you've just described, but there is an outer group which consists of Scandinavian countries, some East Europeans, and I would like to think Britain, which has got a much more pragmatic approach and which concentrates essentially on the trade benefits of Europe. And that's the view that I would like to see. I mean, Europe's evolving at different speeds, and I think it's very unfortunate and foolish in a way that we're walking away at precisely the time where we could have the pragmatic kind of Europe that I think most British people would be content with.
I think one of the reasons the British people voted to leave, and would vote leave again in bigger numbers, is that pragmatic vision is losing in the councils of Brussels.
Well, I think, maybe this is an area we disagree, and I would certainly make the case for that pragmatic approach. I'm not a Euro-federalist, and I do believe that nation-states have a major role.
So where would the point come? Where would the point come with the European Union where you, Vince Cable, would say it's gone too far, we should no longer be a part of it?
Well, I think the key dividing line was actually membership of the Eurozone. I mean, that once you've joined the Eurozone, you're inevitably committed to much tighter integration of foreign policy, of overall economic policy. We've not made that decision, and we're therefore, with the Denmarks and Swedens of this world in a different place. And I think that's a much more comfortable place than actually being out of Europe altogether. But on defence, I mean, I don't believe in having a European army, but
it's coming.
The idea of having practical cooperation on defence with Europe makes a great deal of sense when you've got Trump in the United States behaving in a ludicrous, outrageous, dangerous way, whereas having practical defence cooperation with the French and Germans makes much more sense to me. It doesn't involve a European army, but it does involve sensible cooperation.
I still get back to this point. I think the Liberal Democrats are not fully coming clean with the British public about the true intentions of the European project. And to be frank, if we'd listened to leading Liberal Democrats, we would have joined the euro, wouldn't we?
No, I had a leading economic position in my party at that time. What we said was actually not wildly dissimilar from Gordon Brown, that the principle has got attractions, but before Britain joined the Eurozone, two things would have to happen. First of all, there'd have to be a referendum. And secondly, it would have to be on the right economic conditions, which we defined as the right exchange rate. And we were hopelessly overvalued at that time and have been since, until the recent devaluation of the currency. So, no, we were not unconditional supporters of joining the Eurozone.
If the European Union does press on, and if the Schulz view wins, and the Juncker view wins, and the Verhofstadt, leader of the Liberals in the European Parliament, fanatical Euro-federalist, if that view wins, would you then say that maybe a trade relationship and not membership of a political club could be the best way forward?
Well, I don't think you can make that absolute distinction. I mean, put yourself in the position of Sweden or Denmark. I mean, they are members of the European Union. They subscribe to it. They see great attractions in having a common approach to, say, environmental issues, global warming, but they don't want to be part of the deep integration which you described and Mr. Juncker obviously idealises. So I think that is where we ought to be.
Well, we will see. I have to say, my feeling in Brussels is that it's moving really full steam ahead towards a complete and full political union, whilst at the same time the electors, whether it's in Austria or the Czech Republic or the British in a referendum, are going in a different direction.
Well, you may not have seen that the German Liberals, I mean, with a lot of differences we have with them, but they've been quite strongly resisting the efforts that have been coming from Macron to have much tighter European integration around the Eurozone. So, there are many voices in Europe, not just on the periphery, which believe that the European project is important but shouldn't be pursued in an extreme federalist way.
And what is the right trade deal for Mrs May to try and get?
Well, the best deal would something like what we got at the moment. But given the choice between a Norwegian-type arrangement, which I think is one of the things on offer, which is basically you accept the rules but you have no say over them, and being out altogether, and we finish up like, say, Indonesia or Argentina. I mean, clearly the former is better than the latter, but it's not very good, because it means you have all the problems of the present system and no say over them.
It's not very good democratically either, is it? I mean, 17.4 million people, Vince Cable, voted for independence, voted for us to be free of the European Union. It's not being delivered, is it?
Well, 52% of them voted. It was a majority, you're quite right. But I think what we're now beginning to appreciate are some of the extraordinary complexities of this whole thing, and just walking away and having all the benefits of freedom without paying a price for it, without having any kind of trade arrangement, is not a good outcome. I mean, I think what I think we often forget, and it's an area where I'm surprised we're on different sides of the argument. I mean, the architect of the single market was Mrs. Thatcher, who recognised the benefits to the UK of having a very, very close trade arrangements that goes beyond tariffs. And that is that's the framework that some of us want to preserve.
She very quickly changed her mind about that.
Well, she changed her mind
and said
about,
she was conned into it by the civil service, and I mean, whether she may have supported it in 1986, that support did not last long. I mean, the point is, if we're in the single market, customs union, even if we're aligned in regulatory terms, isn't that prohibiting our ability to strike trade deals with the rest of the world?
Well, this is where I don't understand the Brexit argument. What are these trade deals we're going to negotiate? I mean, the biggest one, obviously, would be the United States. You've got a president who is utterly and completely unreliable, who believes in
he's reliable. Well, okay. You may not like what he does, but he's totally reliable.
He believes in economic nationalism, which is the very opposite of having open liberal trade arrangements. He has to get it through Congress, which may well have changed in a year or so's time. You've got India, which is saying, OK, we can have a trade deal with you. You've got to accept many more visas, which Theresa May will not accept. So who are these trade deals going to be with? I mean, you've got Australia and New Zealand. There's a bit of sentiment, but they've already aligned themselves with China and the United States. So this whole idea of signing up lots of trade deals is just a fantasy.
Well, Switzerland have managed it, and Singapore have managed it.
Yes, but what benefits do they get from it? If you look at the Chinese deal with China, basically what the Chinese have done is basically they've got a small country here. They've made sure that they have maximum access to the Swiss market and have given the Swiss virtually nothing in return. Having a trade deal itself is no great advantage. The issue is what are the terms on which you negotiate it?
And there are many that would argue that our trade deal with the European Union costs us a net £10 billion a year, and we run a $70 billion deficit. So, listen, we could argue the merits and demerits.
Yeah, we will.
I want to finish up on a much more human point. So we're coming towards the end of 2017. This time last year, you were not a member of Parliament. You had, as I know it, no ambitions to lead the Liberal Democrats. You were dancing a bit. You were writing a bit. What's happened to your life in 2017?
Well, I managed to finish the novel. It's out on the bookshelves. Sadly, I've had to abandon my plans to go for the National Ballroom Championships in Blackpool, which I was planning to do. But I'm... much shorter nights, earlier mornings, hard work, a lot of grief, but I think it's worth it.
Is politics addictive?
It is a bit addictive, and I think as long as you feel you're doing something good, you can't let go of it.
Thank you. Well, thank you very much indeed. That was Sir Vince Cable, leader of the Liberal Democrats, and proof, I think, that people with diametrically opposed political views can do so in a civilised, proper environment. Well, next, ladies and gentlemen, it's your turn. First, you're listening to the Sunday edition of the Nigel Farage Show, exclusive in LBC. It's 10:20. Well, Friday morning was a very lonely place for me to be. As I was saying, this is not a deal. This is a complete capitulation. We've given away a huge sum of money. The European Court of Justice will continue to have a say over this country for nearly up to a decade. The concept that we're signing up to regulatory alignment means we're not really leaving the single market and will massively damage our ability to do trade deals with other parts of the world. And I could go on. I thought it was a rotten deal, but I was surrounded everywhere by people saying how wonderful the whole thing was. And as I mentioned earlier, Andrew Rawnsley says, in today's Observer, everyone is happy. Well, everyone except Nigel Farage. Well, a couple of days have gone by and I'm beginning to see people like Tony Parsons in The Sun on Sunday saying, a great deal, PM, ? What about the Brexit we all voted for? And I personally, I'm not interested in these arguments about complexity and difficulty and technicality. We voted for independence. We voted to leave the Union. I don't think this is being delivered. Well, folks, this is your turn. You know, I'm the only one, am I, that really thinks it's a rotten deal? Tell me, if I've got it wrong, come and tell me where I'm going wrong by calling 0345 6060 973, and I'm going to ask Jason in Sutton. Where have I got it wrong, Jason?
Good morning, Nigel.
Good morning.
Really, I think you should really stop being such a snowflake. You know, all your moaning and whining. Just get over it already, Nigel. You won. Stop talking the country down and get on with it.
No, I'm not talking the country down, Jason. I'm talking the Prime Minister down.
Think about it. On that ballot paper was one question.
Yep.
It was, do you want to remain in the EU or do you want to leave the EU?
Yep.
We're leaving the EU. It didn't stay on there whether it's going to be a hard Brexit, soft Brexit, whether we get another trade deal, whether we wouldn't. Talk about immigration, ECJ. None of that was mentioned. None of it was mentioned. The only thing that was mentioned in the campaign, pretty much, was we get an extra £350 million a week, which we all know is a load of old tosh.
Well, what we got was that we'd be able to make our own laws in our own country, judge by our own courts and control our own borders. Surely, Jason, you would agree that was at the absolute centre of the Leave argument.
It was. It was also another pile of old tosh because the government themselves, in a white paper published to the House of Commons, said that the UK has always retained our parliamentary sovereignty. Now, we have that. Okay? We've got seats on the ECJ. The ECJ isn't just some other third-party court. It's got a British judge in there. Now, what the people are calling for is a second kind of international court with British judges and an ECJ judge to look after the rights of EU nationals in the UK. But that's exactly what the ECJ is in the first place. If people like you...
Well, no, Jason. The ECJ is an overtly political court made up in the main of people who aren't even judges.
But they're representative. I mean, we get on to the ECJ, apart from the actual question that you
I don't want the ECJ. I don't want the ECJ to have any jurisdiction at all over this country.
Not over the country, but over citizens who are EU citizens.
Which then means, Jason, that a well-heeled French banker living in London has more rights and more recourse to legal systems than all the rest of it. Can that be right?
No, it's absolutely wrong. We should absolutely retain our EU membership because what you're saying now... listen, what you're saying now...
It's not happening.
That French guy would have because he's an EU citizen, would have better rights than British nationals because he's an EU citizen. You want to leave the EU and therefore lower the rights of British citizens across the largest trade bloc on the planet.
Do you, Jason, support Mrs May's deal?
No, absolutely not.
You don't? Well, you think she should have gone further, do you?
No, I think she's so far out of her depth that somebody should call the Coast Guard.
Right.
Her and David Davis and the rest of them. They just haven't got a clue. Every time they make promises, she's not going to be there to fulfil these promises. Clearly.
Well, I suspect that may well be true. And Jason, just finally, quickly, did you find the words of Sir Vince Cable reassuring when he said the Liberal Democrats want an exit from Brexit? Is that where you think we should be going?
I think we should give the people the choice, a real choice, to say, now we know what Brexit actually is and what it means next October, then let's put that to the vote. Because what we put to the vote before...
And if you lose that referendum, Jason, as well, will you finally accept it or will you ask for yet another referendum?
Well, this will be the third one, because bear in mind that we won the first one by a vast majority of over 60%. The second one was borderline. Even you yourself said a 52-48 referendum would not be the end of it, and we'd need to keep talking. So I think a third one would be the balancing.
Yeah, and do you know what, Jason? I don't think you'd accept that even. But hey, who's to say? Thank you. I'm going to go to David very quickly in Norwich. David, what do you think?
Hi, Nigel. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
I think basically the British people are, in the bulk, angry. My personal view is it's almost as though it's treason on what she's doing to us. It's just been an organised attack on what the British people voted for. June the 23rd last year, UKIP basically led and the British people accepted it. The establishment was so flabbergasted that they'd lost There's been nothing but a concerted joint attack by them and their media mates, basically to say, no, we don't want it. And that's what's happened. We are being betrayed. We voted to leave, and we should leave. Not what they've done now. It's absolutely disgraceful. Just go on to social media and just see what people are saying.
David, I had a feeling I wasn't going to be on my own for very long, and it's not just you that takes a very similar view to me. I suspect many cabinet members, many Tory backbenchers. I think the media's got this completely wrong when they portray overwhelming support for May's deal. David, I think there are millions of people like you out there, and I thank you very much for your input. You're listening to the Sunday edition of the Nigel Farage Show, exclusively on LBC. It's 10:30. On Friday morning, they were all praising Theresa May. Mr Juncker was being nice to her, Mr Tusk was being nice to her, Mr Barnier was being nice to her. Nearly everybody in the Conservative press was being nice to her. Vince Cable was being nice about her. Everybody thought it was absolutely wonderful, a great deal, and I thought it was rotten. I thought it was a capitulation. And how's it a deal? We've put all these offers on the table. We've met nearly every single demand that they've made. And what have we got in return? They're going to talk to us now about trade. Well, that's nice, isn't it? That's great, isn't it? I mean, talk about the humiliation of it all. I mean, a British Prime Minister that has to leave Downing Street at 4:45 in the morning to fly through the night to meet unelected bigwigs in Brussels and say, please, 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 be nice to us and talk to us about trade. I don't see it as a great victory at all. And now 48 hours have gone by, I'm beginning to see one or two other commentators taking a similar view. And basically, folks, what I'm saying is this is not what we voted for. That's my view. Graham says, an excellent debate between you and Vince Cable, measured, patient and absorbing. Should be required listening. BBC, take note. Good Lord. Don't worry, Nigel, you're not alone. I and a whole bunch of leavers I know are as disgusted as you are. Nigel, I'm not happy. We've been humiliated for months, and the only concession we got is an oh-so-generous agreement to continue talks. It is beyond a joke. How can it be a good deal? 39 billion, and that's not yet been agreed with the EU. It will end up being much, much more. Well, do you know something, Billy and Romford? David Jones, Tory MP for Clwyd West, also takes the same view. And David Davis this morning saying, no, 39 billion is tops. I think he's taking a very trusting view of the people we're trying to do business with in Brussels. I suspect the exit bill will finish up being a lot higher than that. And I just think that you go through the newspapers on a day like today, and in general, they're saying how well she's done. Her finest hour was written in one of the big Sunday papers. Talk, yes, about some division within the cabinet, but overall, the voice is being barely represented that this is not what we voted for. And I think that whilst I may look to be a very lonely figure on this, hey, this is not the first time in my experience in politics or public life that I've been in a lonely place. I've generally found the lonelier I am amongst the political classes and the political elites, the more support my view has in the country. We'll see. I've got a first-time caller from Kingston. Kate, on the line. Good morning.
Good morning, Nigel. And may I say, I think it's long barber weather at the moment, isn't it?
It certainly is, absolutely. And I should be wearing mine this afternoon, don't worry. And I did notice that there was not much salt on the roads this morning as I drove in through.
No, interestingly, yes, interesting on that point, Nigel. In fact, a long while back, my local Surrey County Council actually went to Sweden and studied the fact that if you put salt with water, it makes the roads far more efficiently gritted or salted or whatever. But anyway, the effect on cars isn't great. I really wanted to ask you why you see it as a humiliation. I'm very interested in your motivation. It's fascinating to me. You're a fine figure of a man. You put yourself across really well. You wear incredibly well-tailored suits, which I admire greatly. Tailoring's in my family. And I just really always wanted to talk to you, in fact.
Well, why do I see it as a humiliation? I think to have even accepted, Kate, from day one, the basis of these negotiations, that unless we jumped over these hurdles that they put in front of us, they wouldn't even lower themselves to talk about trade. I don't think we should ever have accepted that in the first place. And I also think the fact that they set this 6:50 a.m. deadline, effectively. Do you know why it was done? Because
well, I think I do, actually, but go on.
Well, Mr. Tusk was flying off to Hungary to collect an honorary doctorate at a university. And for that, the Prime Minister has to leave Downing Street at 4:45 in the morning. I mean...
Yes, can I have a quick word, Nigel?
Yeah, you asked.
To talk to you, and you're on the radio all the time, and I'm hardly ever on the radio. It's never.
Well, you are now. You're on LBC. You can say what you like. Well, within reason, Kate, you can say what you like.
Get on. Yeah, right. Lovely. Okay. Yes, I'm interested in the from day one business. The thing is, we live in such a complex global world of trade, as you know. And in fact, what was also happening yesterday, and probably why she had to catch the plane so early, was that the EU had just signed a great big economic partnership arrangement with Japan. So, we live in the world of real politics, of supply chains. Apparently Nissan have been looking at sites in Slovakia and whatever. So we have to cope with a world as it is, not as the world we want it to be. I take your point about day one, but everyone's been motoring on since then, so to speak. So, in fact, if the pound were weaker, it's quite a good thing, because it means that, we could have cheaper American imports and that kind of thing. And people who've fronted forward on the euro will do well out of it. So there's a whole world out there of people doing things while we're getting cross, and quite rightly so in some ways. And, to the man out there now driving our supply lorry down to put a food in the supermarket, he's out on those roads, I'm not. And I have huge respect for all those people who keep the country running. And they run the country, not Theresa May, as she says she runs the country. She doesn't. They run the country. People like that run the country, who keep our country operating and going. And I'm very upset that, the real politics hasn't been taken into account. And people are only told a little bit. So you can like the blue touch paper and the tie, and I wonder where that's going to be, whether it's going to be Peru with your friend Dan Hannon, or whether it's going to be somewhere nice and warm. But, we've all got to make a go of it, haven't we? So I'm just wondering what your motivation is. You talked about being lonely. I think your motivation is, just like mine, I had a crap childhood, a horrible time, and it makes you very angry. And you understand people's anger, and you're not afraid of anything. And I'm not afraid of too much. And that's, I think, the nub of it, is the sheer loneliness of being alive. And that's what's driven you all your political life.
I have a very different view, Kate. I have a very different view of where I think we should go in the future to most of our political class. You may have heard the conversation I had with Vince Cable a few minutes ago. I thought one of the most interesting comments that Vince made when I talked to him about my worries that if we're aligned in terms of regulation, it's going to make it very difficult to sign trade deals with other parts of the world. And Vince kind of said, well, what other parts of the world? What are you talking about? As if Europe was the great thing. And for me, Kate, 85% of the global economy is outside the Eurozone. That is where the fastest growth in much of the... And the problem with this deal that the Prime Minister has done is, and she wants now to go on, of course, to have a further deferral of a couple of years, is that we are effectively saying that from the day we voted Brexit to the day we're able to sign a deal with anybody else will be a minimum of 6 years. And that, Kate, is my frustration.
Okay, well, while you're thinking about the future, Nigel, the rest of us have got to get up every morning. We can't light the blue touch paper under the Conservative Party and retire. We've got to just get on, live our lives, get out there, clean toilets, or do whatever we have to do to keep the world a civilised place. And you know what? My grandfather, he was a tailor, and when he came back from being a prisoner of war in 1918, he had to just you couldn't go and have a nice whiskey in a bar. He had to pick up his shears and get on and start tailoring again, even though his younger brother, who'd been exempted from war service because so many of the brothers had been killed, just like Private Ryan, they had to get on with their lives, pick up their tailor shears and make a living. Make your suits.
And we will, Kate, get on with our lives. It's just a question of whether we do it as being in an independent country or one that is still tied to most of the EU. I wonder what Adam in Carrickfergus thinks. Good morning.
Hi, Nigel. Nice to speak to you again.
Good morning.
I spoke to you before.
I remember, yeah.
I asked you not to, if you would say a bit more often that I told you so. But I'm going to tell you, I told you so this would happen. And you said I was pessimistic. Well, I wanted to say...
I didn't say you were wrong, Adam, did I?
Well, you said I was pessimistic. No, you didn't say I was wrong. That's right. You didn't. But what annoys me more than anything, Nigel, is you get people like Vince Cable coming on saying that, oh, we need to pay. We've already paid, I think you'll find, if he was to go and visit the war graves. Also, they say all the time about the bus, about the 350, and also that we didn't know what we was voting for, and on the electoral paper, that it was just in or out, and we didn't do this and did. I remember David Cameron and his party had a discussion on what was going to go on that paper, and they made it, because we were so thick and racist and all the rest of it, that we didn't understand it, that it was going to be an in or out. That was it. It was simple. It was made simple by the Remoaners. And now that now it's happened and we've got the Brexit, that's going back on what they originally organised themselves.
Is it fair to call you angry of Carrickfergus this morning?
I am annoyed because I listened to Andrew Mardis today and the same old nonsense pumped out every day on the BBC, and he listened to LBC, and there's only a few Brexit people coming on and actually talking the truth.
Adam, I think there are millions of us. Adam, I thank you. And Gary says on Facebook, it's simply not what we voted for. Hear, hear, Gary. You're listening to the Sunday edition of the Nigel Farage Show, exclusively on LBC. It's 10:45. Philip on Twitter says, refreshing to have people with opposing views having a polite conversation about Brexit. If only the campaign had remained on the issues rather than the insults. Well, I'm afraid in a big national referendum, that was just never, ever going to be possible. So, little lonely old me on Friday, almost the only person critical of this so-called deal, and I'm asking you, have I got this completely wrong? I'm going to ask Ben in Bristol. Ben, am I wrong about this? Should we be celebrating this deal?
Yeah, you are wrong, Nigel. You put a lot of work in, it's understandable. Listening to you talk about Brexit, okay?
Yeah.
It's a bit like, there's a new Star Wars film coming out next week.
I didn't, but go on.
It's probably a really good film, yeah?
Yeah.
But if you go with a Star Wars geek, they'll say, oh, but that wasn't the way it was done in the original and that character's actually dead or this, that and the other. They get pernickety, you see. But everyone else is enjoying the film. Does this make sense? I think you put a lot in, Nigel, yeah? But this deal is a good deal. Giving away 40 billion for the price of national freedom, autonomy, spiritually, politically, is a bargain.
Well, do you know what? If you were right, if it was just a case of, OK, 40 billion's a big sum of money, but we're free of everything, then do you know what, Ben? Free. I might agree with you.
Brexit.
I might agree with you.
Nigel, do you remember a few weeks ago, they put it on your website, I told you to relax. You didn't listen to me, Nigel, did you? I told you to relax.
Regulatory.
It's a Brexit. It's fine. Nigel, it's fine.
So it's single... OK.
It's okay.
Single market rules are fine, are they?
Look, it's not. Look, there's just a few years where some of the rules still apply. Okay, now Theresa May is sensible. You can't just go. You can't charge in there, stick two fingers up to them, say we're not giving you any money and we're pulling out tomorrow. It just don't work like that. They were very charmed by Theresa May. It's proven herself.
I bet they were
deeply for many weeks.
I bet they were, Ben.
It's so cynical.
40 billion quid. I'd be charmed.
Look, 40 billion quid. Look, do you not think that that has charmed them and they're going to be more open-minded on the trade deals now? If you went in there and stuck two fingers up to them and said, we're giving you nothing, they would have given you nothing back. And these trade deals are important. This is the big problem with Brexit. By the way, I'm in favour of the Brexit, okay? But the problem will be the trade. The trade's going to take such a hit, Nigel, okay? So there needs to be a transition period. 3 or 4 years. We've been trading with these guys full on for 40 years.
Ben, explain to me why. Explain to me why.
Transition period of a few years. Give the businesses some time to make other links. It's not. You can't do it in 24 hours, Nigel.
So if you have a transition, Ben, and if you have a transition that lasts until the next general election, which is almost certainly where we're going over the course of the next few weeks, you can get a situation where a Corbyn-led coalition could well be elected if Keir Starmer's view, holds sway in the Labour Party, where we actually are stuck inside the single market and customs union for many, many years or decades to come.
Nigel, mark these words, that's not going to happen, okay?
What isn't?
And also, he peaked at the last election, Corbyn's got some nice... Theresa May, people are taking a second look at her now, believe me. They're seeing that all along we did have the right person for the job. The fact that she was kind of not on with the Brexit before, she's a perfect fit. She knows what needs to be done. She's doing the Brexit. She's getting it done. It's fine. Now, there was never, you know yourself, they were never going to get a hard border on Northern Ireland. And they will. If things get out of hand in Northern Ireland, they'll put a hard border in, because people say we can't. The immigration problem was never going to be through Northern Ireland. It was people coming straight over. That will be fine. And there will be a massive reduction on the immigration. There will be. You are going to get the autonomy. You are going to get the Brexit. She's done a cracking deal, and she deserves respect. You look at the pressure and the slandering, even from you, Nigel, that woman has taken over the last few months. And I've been one of the few voices on your phone-in, on other phone-ins, saying this is a good woman. Give her respect. Trust that she knows what she's doing, okay? You don't need somebody too extreme on these talks, okay? You need someone who's peaceable, who's wise, and who can appeal to both sides, but is faithful to what the vote asks for. People like
Ben, you're absolutely fine to praise her personal qualities, and that's fine. And many other people today in the newspapers talk about her resilience, particularly after what happened on Monday with the DUP. But I'm afraid, Ben, to me, she is not going to deliver what very clearly people voted for. We voted for independence, and what we're getting is dither, delay, and this next general election looks to me like it's going to be refought on this issue. But Ben, making a very strong argument for Theresa May. Andy is calling from Walton-on-the-Naze. How's Walton-on-the-Naze for you this morning, Andy?
It's lovely. We've got a bit of snow, but it's not settling, Nigel.
Right.
Honoured to speak to you. Honoured to speak to you.
And what's your assessment 48 hours on from the so-called deal? I
like your line, Nigel. You never trust a Tory.
Right.
And I actually feel that is bang on the money at the minute, because we've been sold out. We have. It's like treason, this. It's betrayal.
You feel as strongly as that, Andy, dear?
Yes, I do. And also, I have deep concerns about the ECJ and the citizens' right for EU citizens over British citizens. I've done a fact packet calculation based on 4 in a family times 2 either side. That equates to 24 million people in my books. Can have the full rights to come and live here.
Well, I mean, free movement, of course, was one of the major issues of the referendum. At the moment, there's been no change at all. Clearly, if we go into a transition period, it's very unlikely that much is going to change during that period. I don't think, Andy, they've even begun to think about or grip the immigration issue or the fishing issue or so many of these things. And I think where they're taking us towards a kind of a Norway Plus model. That's where we're going. We're going to sort of have some sort of new form of single market membership where the British Parliament has virtually no say over the rules and regulations that affect the British economy. That, Andy, I think is where they're taking us. And they'll say, oh, it's okay. It's Brexit because we've left the treaties. But my fear is it'll be Brexit in name only. Andy, I thank you. And I'm going to go to Mike in Bournemouth. Good morning.
Good morning. How are you?
Well, Mike, I just don't think we're getting what we voted for, Mike. That's the point.
No. Well, I voted to join the EEC back in the 70s.
Yep.
And that's all I've ever had a vote on.
Yep.
I voted to leave the EU, which I never had a vote to join in the first place. As far as I'm concerned, why can't we go back to EEC rules? I think that the EU, at the moment, is a continuation of the Third Reich, which cost 80 million lives.
Well,
they're trying to do politically in Germany what they failed to do twice by wars in the 20th century.
Well, Germany may well be the dominant partner, and it is a German-dominated Europe, but it became a German-dominated Europe, actually, with the Eurozone crisis and banking collapse of 2008, in many ways because Mrs. Merkel was the only competent leader there, and because she had authority, unlike the unelected leaders in Brussels. I wouldn't take the German analogy any further than that. Do you see any hope, Mike, for our Brexit process, or do you really feel...
I see a little bit of hope, but I was hoping when I voted Brexit that we'd be pretty much out by now, and it doesn't seem to be anything but obfuscation and confusion, making everybody wonder where the hell we're going to, basically.
Yeah, it's taking too long. Mike, I thank you, and I'm going to go to Thomas in Glasgow. Good morning.
Good morning, Nigel. Pleasure to talk to you.
Pleasure to talk to you.
I thought it was myself who was the only one who thought that Theresa May has just sold us down the river because everybody was giving us such a positive press. Unlike your last caller, please, I'm not comparing the EU to the Nazis. However, what I am comparing Theresa May to is Neville Chamberlain. It's appeasement, and appeasement doesn't work. It didn't work in 1939. There's been other issues of appeasement, and it doesn't work. Now what she's done is given the EU carte blanche to really bully her, because they see that she will capitulate.
Yes.
And now when it comes to the trade talks, then they know that they can bully her. Eventually she will give in. And I don't understand, why are we seeking a trade deal from the EU as opposed to growing up here and actually saying, do you want a trade deal with us? There doesn't seem to be a two-way street. We're begging for this trade deal.
Well, Thomas, one thing I'm completely with you on is that given the number of concessions that she's made, for them to even allow a discussion about the next phase, it's pretty clear to me where the authority lies. And on Monday of last week, when they thought that she may be forced from government because of the crisis of not telling the DUP what she was up to, the people panicking more than anybody were Juncker, Barnier and Tusk. They are now Mrs May's biggest supporters, Thomas, which maybe tells us as much as we need to know. You're listening to the Sunday edition of the Nigel Farage Show. Now, there are so many of you that want to talk on this subject. We're going to keep this going over the course of the next hour. Earlier on, we heard from Vince Cable, and he wants to exit from Brexit, and that's his view. But in the next hour, we're going to get somebody with a very different point of view. We're going to get Conservative MP for Wellingborough, Peter Bone. He's going to be here to share his views. He'll be with us in about 20 minutes. So, rather than me ask him the questions, I want you to ask Mr. Bone the questions. Text me on 84850 with questions for Peter Bone. Tweet using the hashtag Farage and LBC at LBC. Watch me on Facebook. I'm live from a snowy London next.